thrift this entire fit. My fit today is a susty or sustainable outfit. Thank you. I worked with my friend. Shout out to Rosie May. She's not here today, but she is based out in New York City, and she actually does sustainable fashion styling, and she's a designer herself. So we literally went together, and I said, I want to have an outfit for this event, but I don't want to buy anything brand new. And she literally took me to a local thrift store, and I literally found this entire fit from like head to toe, which was pretty great. And a little bit about this panel coming together. These speakers all come from different backgrounds related to sustainable fashion, from folks in consulting to folks really focus in like the supply chain and the retail space. And I think, people think sustainable fashion is just maybe the standard, fashion design business, but I think there's so much more to it than that. And I'm excited for this panel to highlight some of those details. Amazing. So we're gonna have folks fill in the seats. We have a few empty seats up here. So if folks standing in the back wanna grab a seat, we would love to have you join up here to fill the crowd. Would be amazing. Yes, and the sun is nice. Step out of the shade, grab a seat. Grab seats. All right. Yeah, it's gonna be great.
That's all right. It'll be great. It'll be glowing.
All right, great. Okay, well, I will pass it to you. I think we should be fine. There may be a little disruption from the backstage, but I think we could just get started.
Just roll. Thank you.
Yeah.
It'll be edited later on. Okay.
That's right. Let's get started. Thank you, Christy. Shout out to Christy, everybody.
Woo!
First of all, thank you all for being here. Thank you for staying for this panel. And I know there's some more amazing panels to follow after ours as well. My name is Camille Forde. I'm a climate and impact strategist at QB Consulting. QB is a full-service sustainability consulting firm. A number of clients ranging across industries. I've worked with Warby Parker, Aloe Yoga, and Bumble, just to name a few. Before that, I led circular brand partnerships at Poshmark. And I am joined today by two incredible leaders in the sustainable fashion space, Maudie and Julia, who I'll let you introduce yourselves in a minute. But before we do that, I just want to set some intentions for our time together today. We hope to just share some insights, offer some inspiration on different pathways into sustainable fashion, as well as just some practical tips of if you're looking to enter the space or if you're looking to level up, if you're already in the sustainable fashion space. So with that, I'd love it to turn it over to Julia to intro yourself. And I think to start, before we get into your background, if you could just share your name, where you work, and a little bit about your role.
Sure. Thanks, Camille. It's nice to see everyone. Thank you for being here on a Saturday. At least the weather is beautiful for us. So my name is Julia Viner. I work for an organization called the Footwear Collective, where we focus on bringing industry together to solve for circularity in shoes. So shoes are really complex, and we have some incredible brands at the table, such as New Balance, On Running, Crocs, Reformation, who are all showing up every single week, dedicating hours out of their time to align as an industry on where they can invest pre-competitively in different technologies and infrastructure to really scale sustainable solutions for the footwear business. So we'll get more into my background, but love working in shoes and spent a lot of time in apparel as well. So excited to talk about that.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Maudie Barclay, and I work at Wolf & Badger, which is a marketplace for independent brands. We've been going for about 15 years, working with over 2,000 brands who are kind of all purpose-driven brands. And we have stores in West Hollywood and New York and London. So I guess I'll talk a bit more about it in a minute.
Beautiful store in West Hollywood. If you have not been, that's where you should go directly after this. All right. So, Maudie, let's start with you. What was your path into sustainable fashion? And if you could give a little bit about your career as well as education.
Yeah, so at university, I majored in history of art in London at UCL, and I minored in sustainable aquaculture certifications, which is pretty unrelated to what my major and also what I do now on the surface. But it basically led to me, I'd been working in editorial for a few years, and then when I joined Wolf & Badger 7 years ago, our CEO was really keen to delineate all of our 2,000 brands' different kind of purpose-driven elements, but hadn't had anyone know how to do it. So I was hired to do editorial, but he was like, there's this floating project that has no one's kind of run with. Do you want to run with it? And because I had studied sustainable certifications and systems in aquaculture at university, I then applied it to all of our brands that we worked with, which meant that we were the first, I think possibly the first global retailer to do a kind of like entire product catalogue delineated by ethical attributes. So we had 15, we call them guarantees, and they kind of look at all different areas of kind of impact, and they'll highlight what a brand does that's kind of it could be anything, but the brands will kind of we'll vet them, they'll earn from 1 to 15 or all 15 guarantees if they're particularly purpose driven, but it will be stuff like reducing water impact, it will be paying fair wages, it will be upcycling materials, and so I did that as this project, which then led me to kind of have sustainability lead in my title as well as the original thing I'd been hired to do. And then since then I've led our ESG strategy, which is kind of from that initial project. We then got B Corp certified. We were the first B Corp certified marketplace in the UK. And then it's gone on and on from there. And then our ESG mission has kind of also grown, which so that was how I circuitously got into ESG.
Yeah, Julie, would love for you to share.
Yeah, so I have a different background, but I think it's pretty remarkable how everything kind of comes full circle in the end. So I studied fashion. I went to the Fashion Institute of Technology in New York. I was living in New York for the last 10 years and just moved to LA, so excited to be here. I was studying merchandising, and so I was learning financial allocation softwares where I could go be a buyer at Barney's. That was like my dream job when I first started at FIT. And as I was learning these softwares, I became more and more aware of how the lack of data was really leading to one of the biggest problems in fashion, which is overproduction, overbuying, which ultimately leads to brands, disposing, incinerating product, and then writing it off. And so that sort of sent off an alert in my head, and I was like, okay, there's a problem to be solved here. I don't know how I'm going to solve it. I'm 20 years old, but let's see what happens. So from there I started exploring different sustainability roles. At that time there weren't many. There's so many more today, but I ended up doing an online certification it was between the London College of Fashion and the Caring Group that did sort of a deep dive. It was free, which was amazing. And it really exposed me to just the complexity of what sustainability meant within the supply chain. And from there, my journey into sustainability really began. I ended up working a number of internships where I looked at how we talk to consumers about sustainability for brands like Allbirds, Eileen Fisher, Stella McCartney, and The RealReal. And then I had a really, really unique opportunity to join a venture capital fund in New York called Closed Loop Partners, which at the time was very focused on investing in the plastics and packaging industry for recycling. At that time, EPR was in full swing in packaging, and so there was a big opportunity to be sort of investing in that space. And I met a woman who came from the fashion industry and had said to me, I'm looking to build a fund in fashion. What do you know about investing? I go, I don't know a thing about investing. But what I do know is I'm deeply passionate about this industry. I'm deeply passionate about solving the problems that this industry is facing related to upstream and downstream supply chain challenges. And I want to go as deep as we need to go to find the technologies that are going to build the future industry. So looking at technologies in recycling, in material innovation, looking at new business models like resale and rental and repair as a service. And it was really like a masterclass into what could sustainability mean to this industry. And I was really lucky. I got to work with so many incredible startups in that space. And at the time, which has led me now to the Footwear Collective, I had an incredible advisor who was leading fabric innovation at MIT, and she was an advisor to my fund. So we spent lots of time talking about material innovation and the future of sustainability for technology in fashion. And she called me one day and was like, the footwear industry keeps coming to MIT because we put out an LCA analysis 10 years ago. Is everyone familiar with what LCA is? Yeah. No? Life cycle assessment of a product. So what is the carbon emissions that go into making a product all the way through to use? And so MIT had partnered with ASICS on developing this LCA, and therefore MIT became the expert in sustainability for footwear. Not actually. But a lot of companies came back to them and said, what are we doing? Sorry, I know I'm rambling.
No, this is great.
I'm almost done. A bunch of footwear companies ended up coming to the Institute. She hosted a symposium, which is very rare because footwear is a highly, highly competitive industry. I didn't know this at the time. Tons of IP that prevent brands from talking to each other, particularly around materials, around function, fit, and it's created a lot of, silos. But these companies said sustainability could be that place where we come together. It's pre-competitive when it comes to thinking about what do we do with shoes when we're done with them. So that's sort of the mission that we're on today. Sometimes when I talk about my background, it feels extremely random, but I'm always about following curiosity and seeing kind of where the path leads you. But it's also proved to me that there's so many ways that you can move into this space and get excited about this space, and I'll maybe stop there, but yeah.
That's a perfect lead into my next question. And I think, in hearing these two stories, as well as just other stories from peers in the industry, the paths are so incredibly varied. And I think that's the single commonality in it all, if you will. So let's transition to talk about the landscape. What do sustainability jobs in fashion actually look like today? Bonnie, would love for you to share. I think we know the answer to this question. Do you need a fashion background? Do you need an environmental science background? And what do the roles actually look like?
Yeah, so I think I proved that you don't. The roles, it's what I'm seeing, especially in our team, is that we've embedded it across the business. And like me, lots of people have either their objectives are ESG objectives, even though they're an operations manager, they'll have some objectives, sorry, I don't know what my point was there. So I guess that most of them are like me. You'd have a dual focus. So our ESG manager was formerly an accountant, wanted to get into ESG, and joined us as an ESG manager, but then also works in our accounting team. So she has a split role. I have a split role. Then what we've done is embed ESG objectives across the team. So even if it's not in your title, we've got a very impact-driven or a passionate team. So everybody does want to be involved. And that means that kind of everyone has these ESG objectives. The roles probably where it's fashion and ESG is our brands team, because they're sourcing all of our brands, they're doing the account management for all of our brands, and that means that they usually aren't people who have a background, most likely a background in fashion, but then the ESG bit usually comes from their own personal passion, and that is, that's kind of what they look like for us. And elsewhere, I've seen there are fewer dedicated ESG roles within fashion, which isn't great, but it does mean, I think, if you can have these dual roles, that is an opportunity for people to get into ESG, so they can. So that's kind of what it looks like for us at the moment. I do.
Yeah, and I think that's common. Let's talk a little bit about like maybe a non-dedicated ESG role. I think, Julia, given your vantage point in the startup ecosystem, what are you seeing?
I want to say one thing as a follow-up to that, because I totally agree with you. And one of the things that I've noticed in our work at the Footwear Collective, we're working with all of these brands, and within the brands, we're working with many different departments. It's not just sustainability. We're working with folks in retail. We're working with folks in procurement, operations, and a lot of these people have joined our collective to get exposure to ESG within their companies. And so ESG and sustainability doesn't always show up as ESG. It can show up in other sort of ways in the business. And I love what you were saying, because I think it's important to know that if sustainability is a passion of yours, but you love fashion and you want to do merchandising or you want to do product development, you can show up and find ways to embed sustainability into the work that you do every day. I think it's about being curious, and it's about being proactive in taking those steps. The second question.
Startups.
Well, startups are really unconventional, right? I find that a lot of startups that I've seen in the fashion space, it's folks who did not come from fashion. They might be, former engineers, former lawyers, former consultants who, saw an opportunity. I think what needs to be true for a startup of any industry is that you're solving a real problem. And the reality is that fashion has a lot of problems. And so there's a lot of opportunity to move into this space and to get your hands dirty. So if you want to found a company, it's about identifying that problem and building a customer base and building a market to serve that customer and solve that problem. If you're interested in joining startups, there's tons of startups out there that are looking for highly ambitious, multi-dimensional humans who maybe don't come from super conventional backgrounds. I think what I've found in startup culture, whether investing in startups or now I would say I work inside of a startup, is you're going to wear 100 different hats, and being dynamic and being sort of always ready to raise your hand to learn about something, study something, build a case for why we should be investing into a new, platform or a new market. It really requires a dynamic sort of mindset. And so I think so many career pathways lend themselves really nicely to that, which I think is an opportunity where you don't start, studying fashion, or maybe you don't come from, a traditional, what even is a traditional background anymore? So I think there's lots of problems to solve, which means there's lots of opportunity. And I think it's about being dynamic and hungry and wanting to get into it.
On that point of traditional jobs, traditionally, the fashion space as well as the sustainability space does not have a reputation for paying particularly well. I would love to hear from you both briefly, but hear from you both on what does pay look like in this space compared to a more traditional industry?
I think encouragingly, it's not that different from other roles at the levels of seniority that you're at. It basically is dependent on experience, but that's across all the different roles within the business. So that's a good thing. I'm seeing we have our salary banding, and it's the same for an ESG role at a particular level as it is for a brand success role. Yeah, I think that's kind of.
Do you think that's because it's a UK company?
Maybe. I can't I've never had any. I've even never had an ESG role in the US. Is it? I guess. Do you want to speak?
I think not to put you on the spot.
No. I mean, I definitely can't speak to the. Well, I think in the United States, I'm not going to go into that, but actually, it varies, right? It varies depending on sort of the role that you're stepping into, the size of company that you're stepping into. I also think the experience that you bring with you, even if it's not, experience per se in sustainability, maybe you do have experience in accounting, finance, reporting structures, and you can bring that experience in with you and advocate for, why you deserve a certain level of compensation. I think level of experience is definitely an influence, and in the work that I've done, I think that there isn't really a big difference, but you have to advocate for why your role, and why you in the company is, deserving of a salary. But I maybe come from more of like the less corporate side and more the startup mentality, where I think you have some room to negotiate and take some equity or, things like that.
Right, and the pay structure can look different.
The pay structure can look very different.
And I got a little spicy with that UK bit, but I think a bit of what I've seen, it also just largely depends on the size of the company, right, and their resources.
I think that's probably the main, when I'm thinking about it, the community I'm involved with in the UK is very startup, scale-up community, and I think if they're going to dedicate time, if they're dedicating their positioning to ESG or their mission to something that's related to this, they're definitely also going to ensure that their pay is fair and that. So I haven't got experience in a more corporate setting, so I'm probably speaking to that. Certainly in the UK in the startup and scale up, it's very kind of like they're probably cognizant of the challenges for ESG roles and pay, and therefore they've been mitigating that. So that's probably what I've been most familiar with.
That's great. So it's good to hear that there is some competitive pay out there. Well, let's shift to practical. Let's shift to practical entry. What certifications or educational background could give candidates an edge in this market? And yeah, Julia, do you want to take that one?
Happy to. I mean, as we've sort of alluded to, I think there's so many routes to getting into this space, which is exciting. For me, early on in my career, I felt like in order to work in fashion, I needed to go to fashion school. And so, landed on FIT, which was an incredible opportunity. But it also exposed me to the reality that fashion is so big and complex, and sustainability is such a new industry within fashion that I think the industry is still trying to figure out what sustainability means to itself. And so, again, you can come in and, speak to your experience and why it can shape the direction that sustainability moves in this industry. I'll try and give you an example. One of my colleagues is a physics major, and he is incredibly intelligent, did not study fashion, but he started learning some different fashion tools to get into the industry, so like design tools, and learning that tool enabled him to land a job working with a fashion company. So it doesn't always have to be through, formal school. For me, it wasn't, right? I did the London College of Fashion Caring online course, and it was free, and I found that online, and it sparked my interest. I also think something really remarkable about LA is there's so many content sort of generating individuals here and groups here who can help you sort of navigate and get connected to the ecosystem and sort of help you identify where you plug in. So again, an unconventional sort of answer, but I really do think it's sort of Wild West in sustainable fashion these days. And you can kind of choose your own adventure. You just have to, I think being at events like this is really, where you can get started, meeting people, getting connected, learning more about the industry, and, identifying where your skill set plugs in.
Anything to add to that? Perfect answer. We're moving to our last question. What is the best career advice you've received? And we could start with you, Madi.
I think it speaks to what you've been talking about a lot, which is if you can educate yourself alongside, say, not necessarily like through a formal education or degree or anything, but if you, alongside whatever role you currently do, I think if you can I think MIT do a really amazing free online programs you can do. I think that is what really gives people an edge internally when we've given people ESG roles, or they've been promoted into ESG roles, or they've gone sideways from marketing into ESG. It's because they've been so knowledgeable that it's undeniable that they stand out within the team as someone who is clearly knowledgeable, passionate about it. And when those opportunities present themselves to do something related to sustainability internally, like completely across the business, in operations, in marketing, in our brand relationships, then that's the moment that those people who've educated themselves can jump in and kind of like seize the opportunity. So I think taking advantage of any programs, we have a learning and development programs and budget allocated to people doing that. So taking advantage of that, or just doing it yourself, I think probably gives people the edge. This is where I've seen it work the most.
And you, Julia?
I think follow your curiosity and don't let, if you feel that you don't have the right background or you don't have the right skill set, no one knows what they're doing until they're doing it, and they're working with an incredible team who's supporting them. And I think it really is like, follow your curiosity. If you see a problem and you feel passionate about solving that problem, let that fuel you, let it drive you, and don't get discouraged. If you see a job listing or an opportunity pop up on Instagram and you're like, well, I know nothing about this, but I really want to move into this space. Like, take the chance, put yourself out there, build, anytime I meet an entrepreneur, anyone, who's really excited about this space, it is that curiosity and enthusiasm to solve a hard challenge that I'm like, okay, let's do it. Like, let's get into it. So yeah, I'll leave it with that.
Yeah, that's a wonderful note to end on. Well, thank you all for joining us, and thank you to our lovely panelists, and I'll pass it back to Christy.
We're going to get a group photo together. Hang tight. We're going to be transitioning into our Climate Tech Careers panel next. Thank you, guys.